It's okay to want an abortion. Did you know 1 in 4 people who can get pregnant will have one? So it's actually more common than most people think. At CareFM, you can choose what type of abortion care works best for you. We have in-person locations with private entrances in Atlanta, Chicago, and the Washington, D.C. areas. And we also offer medically supported abortion pills by mail in 20 states. For some people, it's more comforting to come into a private office where they can sit with one of our medical providers and either leave no longer pregnant or with abortion pills in hand. For others, they prefer to get abortion pills through the mail so they can decide the best time and place to complete the process. Getting abortion pills by mail from CareFM is simple. Fill out an online form, and a licensed provider will review your medical history. And if eligible, your medication will be shipped to you in a couple of days. Kara, our text-based abortion companion, will guide you through the process from start to finish with instructions, reminders, and answers to all your questions whenever they come up 24/7. With either choice, please know CareFM will support you every step of the way. Learn more at carefm.org.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
From writer-director Ryan Johnson.
The Holy Grail. A perfectly impossible crime.
Wake Up Dead Man has critics singing its praises.
God help me. Anything else?
It's a deliciously entertaining mystery.
That's nice.
It's certified fresh.
It's a miracle!
Okay, you're freaking me out now.
It's the best Knives Out movie yet.
This case is solvable, right?
Oh, you'll see. It's fun.
Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery starring Daniel Craig. Now playing in select theaters on Netflix December 12th. Rated PG-13.
Mobsters could do we could swallow a lot. When I was on the street, we understood that the agents had their job to do. And if they arrest you, be polite to them. This came straight down from John Gotti. If the agents arrest you, be polite to them. Don't curse them. They're doing a job. They have families too. All of the elders taught us that. This is their job and this is our job. And as long as they don't go outside the bounds, that's we have no right to despise them. However, if they're dirty, then they're just as bad as us, and then you don't deserve our respect. And that was sort of how the mob felt about Bobby Kennedy.
Hello. Early in 1957, Robert F. Kennedy and his brother Jack were part of the U.S. Senate Rackets Committee, and they both took the opportunity to attack the notorious Jimmy Hoffa, the leader of the Teamsters Union, and a man with numerous connections to the mob. But as Hoffa probably knew at the time, the two of them were themselves involved with the Mafia. Joining today is former member of the Gambino crime family and friend of the show, Lou Ferrante, the author of 3 volumes on the history of the Mafia in America. And today we discuss the second, Borgata Volume 2, Clash of Titans. This is a 2-parter with the second episode following on Wednesday. Thanks to those that have given a kind rating on Spotify. I hugely appreciate it. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I'd love it if you could do the same. It really does help the pod grow. Coming up on Saturday, we go to ancient Greece and the Sicilian expedition. But today we discuss the more modern Sicilians, as it's the Mafia and the Kennedys with Louis Ferrante. Lou, welcome back to the podcast. It's a great pleasure to have you back on.
Thank you for having me, Oliver. I'm really, really happy to be back.
Well, I was so delighted that part 2, volume 2 of Borgata dropped through my letterbox because I was very keen to read the next section. So it's now out, I think, in the UK as of today or tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, I thought it might have been the 7th, but it may be today. It may be the 4th. Yeah.
Right. And so we're speaking around publication, but this is part 2 of your epic series on the rise and then the rise of the families, the mafia in the US, and then the grip that they have. And in this book, it's extraordinary the power that the mob has, going all the way up to the highest office in the land. And so I don't know if this volume 2 was a particularly enjoyable book to write, because it's just such weighty material, isn't it?
It was. It was enjoyable in the sense that I learned a lot myself doing the research. I had to go deep into the Kennedy administration and the politics of that era. Richard Nixon, Lyndon Baines Johnson. So that stuff was really, really interesting to me. I read dozens, if not over 100 books on the era.
I
And
noticed you read the Caro books in your
loved them.
bibliography.
Yeah, and I have to tip my hat to Caro. He was incredible. That I always had them laying on my shelf, and I always wanted to get around to them. And needing to do the research, I was forced to finally pick them up. And I can't say enough good things about the intense research that he did, which helped me in my quest to find out what I needed to find out with regard to my own history of the mafia. Although he did not get into any of that, I found so much that was relative to what I needed to use in my book, because he did speak about the corruption of Johnson, how corrupt he was coming up, and that plays a big part in my book. The Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon corruption of all of them, and that's Republican and Democrat, both sides of the spectrum. They were just, politics across the board was so corrupt. So it was enjoyable in the sense that I learned so much, but it was also disheartening to know that, I was part of the mob. So I knew that I was a criminal, and you're aware that sometimes you feel like, hey, the government doesn't have any business telling me what to do. This is what we do. This is our life, our subculture. You feel sort of like that arrogant sense of power that the government shouldn't interfere with us. That's how I felt when I was on the street back then. But you did realize, for a change, at some point when I changed my life, I thought that they were the good guys and we were the bad guys. And you realize that they're just as bad in so many ways, the government. It's just a bigger mafia. And that was disheartening to see. And you wonder, to what extent it continues today. But seeing it happening then, they reached into the highest corridors of power. And at one point I did say how J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI in the United States, was he was adverse to tackling the mafia because he knew it went to the highest levels of government, and he did not want to, what was he supposed to do? Have his agents surround the Capitol Rotunda and tell the entire, Congress to come out with their hands up? What was he was in? It was in a jam, and that was eventually what became the feud he had with Robert F. Kennedy when Robert F. Kennedy was appointed Attorney General under John Fitzgerald Kennedy as president. Robert wanted to go after all of the mob, and Hoover was totally against it, and he was dragged to the table kicking and screaming.
Well, let's talk about that, because Bobby Kennedy is a key figure in the first part of actually throughout the book, really. And you mentioned corruption at the highest level. It's mind-boggling. Well, right now, I think the closest Britain's got to corruption in the recent weeks is our ministers have attended Taylor Swift concerts for free. That's about as bad as it gets.
And that's pretty bad, though. That's pretty bad, though, because I mean, geez, you can't fork over money for a ticket.
Yes. Yes. And football tickets as well. The Prime Minister likes to go to the football for free. But it's bad, but it's not okay. Bobby Kennedy is actually his reputation has been somewhat cleaned after his sort of Damascene conversion post his brother's death. That's right. He's running for president, then being assassinated. So he's got a cleaner reputation. But actually, reading the book, I mean, both him and Jack Kennedy are both really in it up to their waist because of their father. And it's interesting you mentioned that Bobby wanted to, because he's on these racketeering committees where he comes up against Jimmy Hoffa. But I was reading in your book that you mentioned Bobby almost doesn't want to go too far because he knows where it might lead, i.e., that his father, Joe Kennedy Sr., had these connections.
That's right. So Joe Kennedy, I established there was a lot of scattered material about Joseph Kennedy, the father, the patriarch of the Klan, being dirty, being involved with the mafia. Usually there's accusations during the bootlegging era, and there's also accusations of his work in Hollywood. He owned sort of like a B movie flick company. Never made it to become like Metro Goldwyn Mayer, but he did have a movie company and he dealt with the mob. Yeah, he needed the mob's influence to keep labor problems at bay. So he was definitely involved with the mafia. And I went to all these different sources to grab a piece here, a piece there, because usually it's like vaguely mentioned in passing, whereas the biographer doesn't want to really taint his image too much, but they want to point out that there are allegations that he was involved with maybe Oni Madden, who was originally from England and became a famous United States gangster in the Lucky Luciano era. So Kennedy was involved with Oni Madden. Kennedy was involved with Frank Costello. Kennedy was involved with Luciano briefly, Genovese. So all of these, Joe Bonanno. So all of these allegations are from scattered sources. So I was able to pull them together and show in one chapter that he looks pretty dirty to me. I mean, if enough people get on the witness stand, this is how a prosecutor, conducts a case, a racketeering trial. Enough people get on that witness stand, eventually the jury scratches their head and says, could 52 witnesses be wrong? I mean, this man was up to something here. So that's sort of what I did to show you that he was corrupt. And then we moved to the part where Robert F. Kennedy does go on to the Rackets Committee. And he's attacking all of these people, and he's very, very carefully avoiding anything that goes near his father, as you said. There was in one instance, they were investigating buildings that were run or controlled by the Teamster Union in New York. And the investigator found out that the buildings were owned by Joe Kennedy. And, Bobby had a heart attack. And he ordered the investigators to desist. He did not want to go down that road. And time and again, that happened also too at one point or another post-prohibition. Joseph Kennedy had connections across the pond with British and Scottish distilleries for alcohol. And he continued to remain in the alcohol business, whiskey business for some time. And at some point he sold that business, but it was crooked and it was mob infested. And he dealt with mobsters because they controlled the distribution here in the United States, even post prohibition. So at some point or another, Bobby, rather in the Kefauver hearings, that came out and it started to creep up again in Bobby's Rackets Committee hearings. And he deaded it. He did not want to go near there. And then there was a lot of commentary on people who were around Bobby who said, you had to see him when when these things would pop up, he would just become a different guy. He'd become all frazzled and wouldn't know what to do because it totally burned him. And he still, despite that, continued to go after mobsters with everything he had. And that's where the hypocrisy comes in. So mobsters could do we could swallow a lot. When I was on the street, we understood that the agents had their job to do. And if they arrest you, be polite to them. This came straight down from John Gotti. If the agents arrest you, be polite to them. Don't curse them. They're doing a job. They have families too. This is their
and you would listen to those instructions.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the elders taught us that. This is their job and this is our job. And as long as they don't go outside the bounds, that's we have no right to despise them. However, if they're dirty, then they're just as bad as us, and then you don't deserve our respect. And that was sort of how the mob felt about Bobby Kennedy. So I saw it in my own day. I was part of that, where there were crooked agents, there were crooked cops, and you're allowed to spit on them if you see them in the street. Don't worry about it. It's okay. But if the guy is a law-abiding, faithful servant of the law, or a woman is, you have to respect them because they're doing their job. We're doing ours. And if they get you fair and square at the end of the day, so be it. You got to go to jail. But it's the dirty cops that we hated. And that's what I saw during the Bobby Kennedy era. They despised the Kennedys because they felt like there was an element of hypocrisy. And that was the problem.
It's amazing how the Kennedy reputation has been so cleaned yeah, I mentioned that about Bobby, but also Jack. I mean, now they're as close as the Americans have to almost like a royal family.
That's right.
Yet
Yeah.
they're dripping in corruption. It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And it all started with the myth of Camelot. That's what I learned throughout my research. Um, the press seized onto this new young president, that he was going to be even before he won. When he was campaigning, the press just was all in on defending him and overlooking any faults that he might have had. And they really, really went all in on him. And they created this myth of Camelot, where it was almost like our royal family. And whatever they did, they were able to pretty much get away with, and it was swept under the rug. And then I get into it much later in the book, where after the assassination, there was a serious concerted effort on the part of Bobby Kennedy to destroy evidence that would make his deceased brother look bad. And he really, really was all in on the cover up, because he did not want the Kennedys as a clan, himself or his brother, to come across as these corrupt people. And he was instrumental in really, 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 sweeping everything under the rug, along with all the crooked actors, following the death of his own brother. I may have jumped ahead in our interview.
No, it's fine. We can do that.
Yeah. So that was, to me, that was interesting. And that sort of like perpetuated the myth of Camelot. Now, having said that, I walked away having done all of this immense reading for years on the Kennedy administration, the Kennedy clan, Kennedys as people, biographical figures. I walked away with I hated Bobby Kennedy. I could not stand him after I walked away from all of my research. However, I had a soft spot for John F. Kennedy as a person. Whatever he may have done wrong or right in his administration, to me as a person, I feel like he was an incredible human being. He was very easygoing. He forgave people very easily, whereas Bobby held grudges. Joe Kennedy used to say, Bobby hates like me. We're both haters. If you cross us, we'll hate you forever. Whereas John Kennedy, if you cross John Kennedy the next day, he shook your hand and said, hey, let's have a touch football game on the lawn. He was just the most easygoing, nicest guy you can imagine. And I think that throughout his administration, he really, really wanted to perpetuate peace in the world. And in doing so, he made crucial mistakes, specifically on the issue of Cuba, which contributed to his death. I think he made a major mistake at the Bay of Pigs, and I think he made a major mistake during the missile crisis, where both times he, quote unquote, missed the bus, having two opportunities to overthrow the Castro regime and get rid of this communist thorn in America's side, right here in the Caribbean, 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And I felt like there was a lot of angst toward him because of that, and he blew it. Now, if you assess him as a person, he blew it maybe with good intention, but he nonetheless blew it and made people a lot of people nervous, thinking that he was soft on communism.
Hello, Ollie here. Please forgive my interruption, but I wanted to let you know that at Aspects of History, we produce a digital magazine featuring articles, interviews, short stories and book reviews of the best historical writing available. Authors featured including Ben McIntyre, Lucy Worsley, Andrew Roberts and plenty more. An annual subscription is available for only $9.99. That's pounds or dollars. Yep, you heard that right. That's 6 issues for under £10 or dollars. Head over to aspectsofhistory.com to subscribe, where you can also gift subscriptions. Now back to the show. Now, yeah, because that's so in this country, recently we had Max Hastings write a book on the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Brilliant.
I don't know if you...
Max. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And in that book, I mean, he writes about the skill that Kennedy showed during the crisis, and how the result was actually beautifully done. And so Jack Kennedy gets a seal of approval, but that's not how it's viewed with large parts of the American.
No, I'm a huge fan of Max Hastings. However, I do feel with regard to that subject, I do feel like he's following the party line, which is the perpetuation of the myth of Camelot, that Kennedy makes no errors. Kennedy makes no mistakes. Kennedy wanted peace in mind. As I said, he did. He was after peace. But he made major errors. If you just want peace, if I'm an advocate for peace, I don't think the position for me in this world is the White House, because at times you have to make really, really crucial decisions that may include the destruction of life or property. It may include war. And if you're totally against war, which Kennedy really was at the heart of him, he really didn't want war. And if you're totally against war, and this is a heroic man, by the way, I pointed out his heroics during World War II. His actions in the Pacific Theater was incredible, the heroism. And I wanted to make sure I pointed that out in the very beginning of the book. So I established him as a heroic character. But he wanted peace. Maybe he saw the destruction in World War II. He wanted peace wholeheartedly. However, if you want peace, you'd be great as an activist with peace signs, maybe protesting outside the White House, if that's what that's your quest in life. Not the White House, though. The White House, you're pushed into a position where you may have to make serious decisions. And many presidents that we've had that have gone to war wanted war. I believe that during the Bush administration, I believe that they wanted war. However, I think during Harry Truman's administration, I don't believe he wanted war with Korea. And I think he reined in MacArthur. So there are presidents who want it, presidents who don't. But I think that there's crucial decisions that need to be made. I don't think Jack was equipped to make those decisions because he was bent on peace. And also, I do believe that the Camelot myth surrounding him, even then in real time, affected his decision making. Because if he's thought of as this peaceful president, the new president who's going to create all this peace in the world, he doesn't want to cause wars. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do. He's got this sort of legendary machine around him now, creating this legend of John Kennedy in real time. And I think the last thing he wanted to do was give himself a smear by invading somewhere like Cuba. But the Joint Chiefs of Staff, however, and many people on his staff felt that it was a big mistake. So let's start with the first one, the Bay of Pigs invasion. When the exiles, they were trained by the CIA, the Cuban exiles, 1,500 something men landed on the beaches, or 2,500, rather 2,500 something men landed on the beaches in Cuba at the Bay of Pigs. And they expected American support. They were promised American support, and they were promised air cover. But Kennedy did not want to look like America's hand was behind the invasion. So he denied them that air cover. And there are literally, and I quote this in the book, there are literally radio calls from the beach being picked up by ham operators here in the United States going, please, we beg you, if you care about freedom, we are on the beaches, we're pinned down, we're going to die, send help, please. They're begging for help. And all of the people around Kennedy are begging him to please provide air cover, please provide U.S. support somehow. We need to get these people off the beaches. We trained them for a year. We sent them there. We promised them this support, and we're not giving it to them. So we didn't give it to them in the end. Castro, his counter strike was sufficient to destroy the invasion. He put them all in prison for a long time, and then he eventually let them out for a king's ransom. And that was a smear on Kennedy's reputation. Now, what happens is we sort of like emboldened them, Khrushchev being behind Castro at that time, Khrushchev, the premier of the Soviet Union, being behind Castro, the dictator of Cuba. We sort of emboldened them to put missiles in Cuba now. They figured, look, Kennedy's soft. He's not going to do anything. Let's put them there. And Khrushchev later said that he knew Kennedy would eventually tell him to take him out. But his chess move was to then counter with, then you take your missiles out of Turkey that are pointing towards the Soviet Union. And that's sort of the quid pro quo that we'll have, arranged here if we could just get them to the table, the Americans. That's what he later said, Khrushchev, in his memoirs. But basically at that time, Kennedy discovers there's missiles in Cuba. The CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his advisors, many of his advisors are saying, including Lyndon Johnson, who was his vice president, here's our opportunity. We cannot allow nuclear missiles 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Send in the Marines. And we will look like the patriotic heroes that we are, and not the imperialist mercenaries that Castro tries to portray us as. So they're pushing Kennedy to do it, and Kennedy feels like he's being pushed, and he takes it as a competitive challenge to who he is, and he doesn't want a war. He doesn't want to invade Cuba. And Bobby advises him it'll blacken the name of the United States in the pages of history. don't do it, Jack. So basically, Bobby and Jack, almost like alone against all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, most of the advisors, the CIA, everybody's telling him, go in, here's your opportunity. And he says, no, I won't do it. I refuse to do it. And then he makes that sort of quid pro quo with Khrushchev, where he disables the missiles in Turkey, pointing at the Soviet Union, which, by the way, made NATO countries very, very angry. You know, you have de Gaulle going, what the hell are you doing? You know, our security is dependent on these missiles. Are you kidding me? You can't. I think it was Macmillan at the time. He said, "Go in. You got a green light. Go in. Run it in." And then later he changed his mind, obviously, because he wanted to go along with the whole. The press was saying Kennedy did a great thing.
At CareFM, you can choose the abortion care that works best for you. With in-person visits in Atlanta, Chicago, and the D.C. area, or medically supported abortion pills by mail in 20 states. Some people feel more comfortable meeting with a provider in person and leaving either no longer pregnant or with pills in hand. Others prefer getting abortion pills by mail. Just fill out a short online form and, if eligible, your medication arrives in a few days in a plain package. When you choose abortion pills, Cara, our text-based abortion companion, is with you every step of the way, offering 24/7 support and answers whenever you need them. However you get care, CareFM will support you every step of the way. Learn more at carefm.org.
The argument is that going in would have prompted a nuclear response.
They say that was the fear. So that's Kennedy's.
Yeah.
That's the Kennedy. The advocates for Kennedy's decision is that it would have. The people who attacked that decision rightly, I feel rightly call Khrushchev a bluffer. Khrushchev was a big bluffer. You know, he's slamming his shoe on the microphone. You know, he's always making this big show. He's a big bluffer. He knew he didn't have the power to fight the United States, and he knew he would have been. He said to Castro at one time, Castro said, let the nukes fly. And he said, are you out of your mind? He told Castro. He goes, your little island will be crushed into powder. He says, are you out of your mind? He told Castro that. That came out later. So
Castro has this kind of fatalism. He almost wants, he's sort of bring it all on, isn't he?
Bring it on. Let's fight to the end. You know, I mean, that's sort of like from when he was in his college days. If you study enough about Castro, that's sort of how he was. He was all or nothing. You know, he was Van Gogh painting in the weeds, you know, like, you know, it's all or nothing. Now, this is what I'm doing. I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't drink. Castro wanted to go all the way. I feel that there's people believe, and I believe with them, that Khrushchev was bluffing. I don't believe it would have ended up in a nuclear holocaust if they just went in and you know, it was a pawn in the game, Cuba was. And we would have had an opportunity, I think, to just like get rid of, we had the Monroe Doctrine, you know, that was being willingly broken by Kennedy, allowing it to happen, people felt. You know, you're not supposed to have another power in this hemisphere. That was our Monroe Doctrine. We control this hemisphere. And until then, it was sacrosanct. And then all of a sudden, you know, Kennedy said, well, I don't want to risk a nuclear war. Now, having said that, I don't know what the end would have brought. Maybe Kennedy was right. I have to admit that. However, in my book, I'm not saying whether he was wrong or right, because he may have been right. Let's play both sides of the coin, right? He may have been right, and he may have been the hero of the century by saving a nuclear holocaust. I don't believe it would have happened, but you know, maybe these are the same people, by the way, who say that Kennedy saved a nuclear holocaust. The same people today will tell you invade, don't care about Putin, don't worry, he won't fire a rocket. He'll never do a nuclear bomb. Don't worry about Putin. He acts like a nut. He is a nut, but he's not that nuts. These are the same people telling you that today. So who knows? We don't know, right?
I'm actually glad you've brought this argument to the fore, because I don't think it's one that we necessarily hear very much, certainly in this country. Mm-hmm. But I know listeners might be thinking, okay, so what's all this got to do with the mafia?
Exactly. That's where I want to get to. So whether Kennedy was wrong or right, and that's exactly where I was going, whether he was wrong or right did not matter for my story. And my story is how the Cuban exiles felt betrayed by the Kennedy administration twice. So the Cuban exiles are the several 100,000 Cubans who landed on our shores following Castro's revolution. Many of them fled for their lives, and they wanted their homeland back. And they were promised that America would liberate their homeland and return them to their homeland. And they were made all these promises, and especially the militaristic Cubans who were part of the invasion and who were desperately wanting to help during the missile crisis and go in there as saboteurs. These Cubans were the heroes of liberty, the mascots of liberty for a long time, until Kennedy makes that secret deal with Khrushchev to disarm the Turkeys in the missiles in Turkey, and also tells Khrushchev, I will not interfere with Cuba again. And then he tells his administration to start locking up the Cuban militias that are operating on U.S. soil who were backed by the CIA. And those Cubans who despised Kennedy happened to be operating and happened to be partly funded, in large part, by Santo Trafficante in Florida and Carlos Marcello in Louisiana, two of the biggest mob bosses in the country. And those two mob bosses despised the Kennedy administration for all of the harassment they were receiving throughout their tenure, their reign as bosses. And they desperately wanted to destroy the Kennedy administration. And now, because of two major decisions that Kennedy made, whether wrong or right, the Cubans now hated him, and they felt like they were being persecuted by the same nation who told them you were the mascots of liberty. And they drove them, the Kennedy decisions drove them straight into the arms of the Mafia. And now you have the Mafia, you have the Cuban exiles, and you have the CIA agents, many of them rogue agents, who hated and despised Kennedy for blowing those two opportunities in Cuba. And those CIA agents gravitate towards the Mafia and the Cuban exiles. So now you have a cabal. You have the two biggest mob bosses, Santo Trafficante and Carlos Marcello, who, by the way, Marcello's empire was estimated at earning over $1 billion a year. So he's a very wealthy man and could fund pretty much anything he wants. So whatever funds the CIA now is getting, whatever funds are cut off from the CIA with regard to the Cuban exiles, and whatever funds the Cuban exiles are losing now that they were getting from the American government up until that point, they're desperate for funds now. Who picks up who takes out his wallet and picks up the slack? Carlos Marcello. So Carlos Marcello says, don't worry about it. I got you back. And then he partners with a brilliant man by the name of David Ferry. And David Ferry is a radical right-wing zealot who despised Kennedy for the errors he made in Cuba. And he is the man who, and I believe this will be proven if we get a final file document dump, he is the man who orchestrated the entire thing. And he brought all the pieces together. He's got Marcello's money. Santo Trafficante is positioned in Florida as the boss of Florida, where all of the Cuban exiles are rotating in his atmosphere. And he's doing a lot of illegal deals with them. So he's got the Cuban exiles, Santo Trafficante, and you got the CIA, who David Ferry was connected to. And those three elements, the Mafia, CIA, quote unquote rogue agents. We don't want to accuse the entire CIA out of Langley. They may not know exactly what was happening, but they were agents of the CIA, just as today there are agents of the CIA who do what they want and know the government will back them if they get caught. So they were rogue agents of the CIA, and also to the Cuban exiles. You got Mafia, CIA, and Cuban exiles all together, and those are the three culprits that eventually descend on Dallas in November 1963.
Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget part 2 follows on Wednesday, and plenty more history on the way, so please do follow, like, and subscribe. But until then, thank you, and good night.